Today's reading, we hear how Jesus called the first four apostles, Andrew, Simon, James, and John, from their lives as fishermen. We hear how they left everything to follow Jesus, to learn from him, and to continue Christ's mission of sharing the good news with the whole world. Our first reading, we heard how God called Jonah to be his prophet and to save the people of Nineveh, asking them to turn their lives around, to follow the Lord. Last week, if you remember, we heard the call of Samuel, who was a young boy, to become a prophet and then a priest. Today, January 25th, usually the church celebrates the conversion of St. Paul. Paul's conversion and his call from God led him to spread the gospel message throughout the known world at the time. And as you know, half the New Testament is Paul's letters to different Christian communities, encouraging in their lives of faith. I hope you see the pattern I'm trying to draw. The pattern is that throughout history, God calls many people from their regular lives to follow him, to live the gospel, and to share it with others. And as baptized Christians, you and I are called that same way, even by name, to live the gospel message, to live good and holy lives according to the commandments, according to the teachings of Jesus Christ. And we're invited to invite other people as well into the family of God, to start a deep and personal relationship with Jesus. Now, sometimes we may doubt this. We may believe that God no longer calls people. We're in 2015. That was 2,000 years ago. It doesn't happen nowadays. But the truth is, God still calls today. He still calls people the same ways before for the same purpose. And the fact that you and I are here today says that God has called you. He's spoken to you. He's acted in your life. And we all have that story to share, just as we heard those stories of Andrew, Simon, James, John, Samuel, Jonah, St. Paul. We all have a story to share. It's all different, too. It's unique. And it's important to share those stories. That's why we read these stories. But when you think about it, what do we talk about when we talk to our friends, the people we meet? We talk about the weather outside. We talk about a sports game that happened in a different city or maybe a different country. We'll talk about technology or gadgets and things like that, none of which are about us. If you want a deep and personal relationship with someone, start to share something important to you, something close to your heart. And that's why it's important to share our stories of faith, because faith is clearly important to each one of us here. So we should share those stories with people. And it's important to share that with other people. Why? Because first, it serves as a reminder for us. We share our story, it's a reminder for us of where we came from, what happened in our lives. Then it's also a positive and powerful testimony, a witness for anyone who hears your story, who you choose to share that story with. Because hearing a story that you may share will inspire us, will encourage us, will support us in our journey of faith. So I encourage you, in fact, I challenge you, sometime this week, maybe in the next month, take the time and think about your story. How has God acted in your lives? Who has he used in your life to bring you into this relationship with Christ? Who is important to you? Maybe grandparents, important First Communion, teachers at school, whoever it may be. Parents, think about it. And think about key moments in your life that have been powerful, either privately in prayer or something happened and you felt like God was present. Think about your story and then share it with someone. Build up the courage to share it with someone. Now, today's my first anniversary of ordination to the priesthood, so I figure if I'm going to challenge you, I better start the trend. So I'm going to share a little bit about how God called me about 10 years ago to leave my career and to follow him and to become a priest here, to serve you here at St. Monica Church. So back in 2006, I had a great job. I was working at IBM in Toronto, and I felt like I had what society and people had told me would bring success, bring me happiness in life. An excellent job, a promising career, beautiful girlfriend, and a place to call home. I thought life was good. In fact, I thought I had it all. But something was missing. I felt empty inside. Surely there had to be more to life than all these things. There had to be more in life. Now, I heard God's call to the priesthood at a very young age, in fact, as an altar server. Yet in high school, teachers and guidance counselors encouraged me and everyone in my class, just pick out what you want to do, you're going to university. It was sort of the default. So I just did what everybody else did and did well with it. I kept pushing aside this idea of being a priest because I didn't want to seem different. The truth is, I am different. And it doesn't take a genius to notice. You look around and we're all different. We're all unique. It's what makes us precious and special in the eyes of God. He has made us all different, all unique. What I call this checklist of life, sort of, go to school, get a house, do a job, all these things, this checklist of life, as determined by our society today, was getting done at a rapid pace in my life. But I felt like there had to be more. Now this is when I heard God's call in the background starting to get louder and louder. So this brought me to a crossroads. I had to make some tough decisions because I had this deep desire to serve God and not a company. I wanted to save souls for Christ rather than expense dollars for a corporation. I wanted to promote life and love rather than capitalism and new business opportunities. People began to tell me at Mass, have you ever thought of being a priest? Let me tell you, the first time someone asks you that question, it kind of takes you aback. I developed this overwhelming gratitude for God's goodness and generosity in my life. And I began to understand more profoundly that Jesus died on the cross for my sins. Not someone else's, not 2,000 years ago, people's sins. For my sins. It became something personal, something tangible, something real, and not something I heard other people talking about occasionally. I began to pray more often, even several times throughout the day. And I started to attend weekday Mass as often as I could. I asked myself that question, what is happening to me? Nobody I worked with, nobody I knew was going through those feelings, those desires. So I went and I asked my pastor, I said, can you help me with this transformation going on? He later became my spiritual advisor and gave me the advice I needed to navigate this conversion going on within my heart. Began to read the Bible at work during my coffee breaks, my spare time at home. The Word of God would jump right off the pages and penetrate deep inside my heart like never before. God's unique and personal love for me, His Son Matthew, became real, something I could feel, and not just something that other people would talk about occasionally. So at that time, there was a World Youth Day happening in Germany. So I decided to go, just out of curiosity. What are all these Catholic young people gathering to meet the Pope? At the time, it was Benedict. I thought, well, I've never been to Germany, and I'd love to see the Pope, and we'll see what happens. That experience was overwhelming. It was there that I realized firsthand how the Catholic Church is truly universal, guided by the Holy Spirit. And it was there that I met many young Catholic friends my own age who helped me to grow in my faith and encouraged me, providing a supportive environment to live the Christian values, which, as we all know, it's not exactly easy to do these days. My pastor then introduced me to this house in downtown Toronto where young men live together while working or studying, whatever they're doing, who feel called to the priesthood, but they need time to figure it out. But that was too much of a change. I didn't want to do that. But they did have this associates drop-in program Saturdays. So I dropped in on some Saturdays, and what they would do was they would talk about these desires, these feelings that maybe I'm called to be a priest. We'd pray together, they'd bring in a priest, he'd celebrate Mass, we'd have lunch together, and we'd socialize. It was just a great opportunity to be with like-minded individuals, going through the same thing. And the good Lord continued to be faithful, guiding my steps through this whole process. It was through that associates drop-in program that I was invited to go to a come-and-see weekend at the seminary. This is where it's kind of like a try before you buy experience. You go there for a weekend and you see the life that seminarians are living, and you live it for 48 hours, and you see, does that resonate with you? Do you feel called to that life? And if you remember the parable of the rich young man, when Jesus says, if you really want to follow me, sell everything and then follow me, and he just couldn't do it. And I left the seminary like that, with tears in my eyes, just like the parable in Mark's Gospel, saying, no, I'm way too attached to my career and to my life. I just can't give this up. And so that was a difficult time, but it was, as I tried to get back into my regular life in the months that followed, God's invitation to be a priest continued. to get stronger and stronger, to the point where that call to follow Jesus as a priest was something I could no longer ignore, no longer push aside. So I decided I'm going to remove all the distractions in my life to see clearly, A, maybe God's not calling me. To be honest, that was what I was hoping for. Or B, whether I was just wrestling with giving up certain things, and sure enough, I would realize that. So I took 2 months off work, broke up with my girlfriend, and decided it's time to get serious to listening to God's will. Lord, these 2 months are yours. Tell me what the answer is. And all my life I'd been asking the same question, and you'll resonate with this question, you'll know what I'm talking about. We'd ask our kids this, I was asked this so many times, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do in your life? So I was kind of haunted by that question. And it was during those 2 months off I realized that's the wrong question I've been asking myself, and maybe even the wrong question we ask our young people. The question that I needed to ask was, what does God want me to do? What has He called me to do? What has He created me for? Why has He given me these strengths, these weaknesses, these life experiences, born and raised here in Canada in this time in history? What has He asked me? What has He created me for? What is God's will? That is the question that I needed to ask. And it was after those 2 months that I realized the good Lord gave me the grace to overcome my attachments to things, and it was like a burden was lifted off my shoulders. I felt so free. I returned in February that next year to another come-and-see weekend at the seminary, this time no tears, big smile on my face, ready to do this, and at peace with that decision to follow Jesus and to become a priest. God asked the prophet Isaiah, "Whom shall I send and who will go for us?" I think of that each morning. I say, "Here I am, Lord, send me."